In Italy we have a different perception of beauty. It's not just a philosophical concept. It's something that you can feel, you can hear, you can taste in every moment of your life. It's a sort of an experience for us. And we're looking for perfection in every details. Because when we talk about a finissimo automatic movement, we talk about a grand complication watch. In the finissimo execution, you need just the things that have to work in a proper way.
Today we're in Neuchâtel. We're going to talk with Guido Terreni, Managing Director of Bulgari Watches. We're going to talk about the record-setting watches that they've launched in the last few years. There's the thinnest tourbillon ever made, they introduced in 2014. There's the thinnest minute repeater they introduced last year in 2016. And this year they surprised friend and foe by launching the thinnest automatic movement in the world. It's not by chance that Bulgari did those 3 world record-setting watches. They've been building that on a long history of expertise and knowledge. We're going to talk with Guido Terreni.
Faces look like grey ashes, Victorian houses I've never seen. Don't hear no music, only good soup. Big pigs reading and lightning boots.
Guido, thanks for taking the time to talk with us today. Bulgari has been amazing everyone with the 3 ultra-thin watches in the Octo collection. Can you talk a little bit more about why you chose to go for the ultra-thin complication?
Well, the idea started in 2011, so we were talking about 6 years ago. And we were observing that in the industry, the ultra-thin watches were very beautiful timepieces, inspired by tradition, but they were anchored in an old-fashioned style. So we were talking about the aesthetic codes that were very traditional, codes of the 50s, the 60s, so not our generation. Furthermore, they were destined to formal occasions. So we wanted to really change the rules of the game and bring into this Italian elegance, which is very contemporary, and to come up with a collection that was meant for the most elegant men of our days. Of course, we needed the movements that we didn't have, so we started developing them in those years.
Developing these ultra-thin movements is rather complex. So how much of the knowledge that you needed for that was already in the company, or did you need to set up a new company, develop new skills and knowledge in order to create those ultra-thin movements?
Well, the company had already started a process of internalizing know-how at the highest level possible. Everything started in the year 2000, in July, when the family bought 2 very niche but very high-end brands, the Gerald Genta and Daniel Roth. They were able to do Gransonerie, to do high-end complications. And there we had a knowledge not really on ultra thin, but when you do a complication and you have 900 components for a Gransonerie, of course, the questions of being thin exist. So the savoir-faire was already there, but it was not applied to a simple 3-hand watch movement or a simple tourbillon movement. The talents were already there. The knowledge was extremely high in construction. But that's not only the part of the watch, because the other part of the watch is the habillage, the case and the dials. When you have a case of 5 millimeters and 40 millimeters wide, you have tensions that the owner of the watch is putting on the watch. When you pull your strap and you have your Adillon fit of the strap, you're pulling a tension on the case. So especially on gold, which is not a very stubborn material, you need to understand which are the consequences of that. So having an integrated manufacture is a beauty in terms of understanding the limits that you can do as a whole object. You don't find out when you assemble parts that somebody else does, but you do it in the process of creating it.
How many years did it take to, for instance, create this one? Was it already in the planning since the beginning to create the thinnest automatic movement and that big case so extremely thin?
Well, the dimension of the case and the choice of the Octo was there from the origin, because the Octo is such an iconic statement in terms of style. The idea started with a high-end approach and with an approach that was also for an everyday use. So the automatic movement was at the beginning of the idea, but it was the longest to develop. In fact, we came out in 2014 with the tourbillon, the thinnest tourbillon in the world, but with a manual version of the petit second, because the balance of the energy of the automatic with the micro rotor is very difficult to understand. In fact, we started from 4 Hertz and then we went down to 3 Hertz as a frequency to find the balance correct. So that was the most challenging part in terms of development on the movement side. But I'm very proud to have achieved it with 60 hours of power reserve, which is not negligible on ultra thin watch.
Now, the technical construction is rather impressive, and everything that I've seen in Le Sentier in the workshops was very impressive. Can you tell us more about how is Bulgari Watch Division organized?
I would say that everything came up day by day, no? Because the objective to have a manufacturer was an objective that started 15 years ago. Then you have to find the opportunities to find the correct ways to internalize. So starting from Darinrot and Geralgenta, we were looking at who were their suppliers, which were dial suppliers, very niche, very small company. Those founder-owned company where the founder does everything from the development, and then he has to deal with banks, the toilet paper for the restrooms, everything. No? So we took out everything that is not on the métier. So we supported that and make the métier blossom. So now I'm very proud to say that we have an integrated manufacturer that really can perform. We do 90-95% of our production in-house.
I found it very interesting to see the construction with the monoplatine and the ball bearings. Can you tell more about that?
Well, that was an idea who we clearly partnered in developing on having an innovative way to build a tourbillon, because the tourbillon cage is very thick usually, no? So the idea of having a monoplatine where every part is put on the platine with ways of setting the components and keeping them in place was a new way for a tourbillon, and the ball bearing system clearly is the reason for which the tourbillon is so flat, because basically it's held by the ball bearing system around the cage and not with a bridge that covers the tourbillon cage that would have added a 1 millimeter for sure.
As a designer, we love to play with constraints. This is my pleasure, and often the constraints drive the aesthetic in the object and makes a turning point in the project. You never know when the idea comes. It's impossible to manage the creativity, but you have to nourish the creativity. And Italy is the perfect place to nourish it because you have a lot of different inspiration, architectural elements, amazing piece of art. So I think that it's important to feel and to see a lot of different things to make the best expression of your design.
The design is also kind of outstanding, novel, very impressive, masculine, if I may say so. How did this kind of design come to what it is now?
It is inspired by the purity of Italian design, if you want. Italian design is not decorative, it's about its proportions, it's about being very clean, very simple, and very long-lasting in its taste. No? And everything started in terms of aesthetic with the minute repeater, the thinnest minute repeater in the world that we did last year, where you have technical and aesthetical elements that are very bond together, no? Because, for instance, the choice of the material in titanium was a technical choice because the titanium chimes very well. So you do a choice of material, the titanium, which is very powerful in terms of chime, but also you have the indexes that are hollow. The indexes are done hollow aesthetically, but also to have the sound that propagates also on the upper side of the dial. So you're using the whole space of the case, even if the case is only 6.8 millimeters. So at the end, you have an aesthetic choice, which is also functional.
This is possible today because with our manufacturing side we're able to produce this kind of object. Not just movement, but even dial, case and bracelet. So that's why I decided to move the design center from Rome to Neuchâtel 6 years ago, to stay close to this manufacturing side, because it's very important that when we have an idea, we have to be able to develop and to produce it. And we start to imagine the new movement. When you have your manufacturing side, you can manage your destiny. When you don't have it, you are obliged to buy components, and the approach is totally different.
And the automatic, when you have the bracelet, I think the bracelet is coping the case in a way that which is perfect. But even the buckle, it disappears, no? Inside the bracelet.
Super thin.
Nobody ever did this because the buckle is basically set into the bracelet in order to fit inside the 2.5 millimeters of the bracelet. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the deployant buckle would have been thicker than the case itself. Mm-hmm. And we didn't like that aesthetically, and we wanted a slim fit also on the outside of the wrist.
It's very important that when we talk about the Finissimo, we talk about the latest pleasure to wear grand complication watch. It's something that absolutely on your wrist, it's something that you can hide if you want, is without any decorative elements, and is just for your private pleasure.
Those are very difficult things to do, but they are at the service of an aesthetics. That's the difference of an Italian brand with a Swiss brand. It's not technique that drives the choices, is aesthetic who drive the choices in an Italian brand like us.
So in 2010 the Octo collection was introduced. Can you do a brief overview of all the watches in the collection and how it started until where we are today?
In 2010 the family decided to integrate Danerot and Argenta into Bulgari, I would say Genta especially. And doing that we started from the complications, so what was already there, the Grand Sonnerie, the tourbillon, the retrogrades that were that was the assortment at the time. So then in 2012 we really went the whole way, understanding that we had a very potential design in our hands, and we launched the Hour Minute Second version in 41 millimeters, and that is probably the father of everything in terms of idea of the collection. After that, we evolved it into the ultra thin, so the Finissimo with the ideas that I told you before, and we understood that this would have been the backbone of the male business for Bulgari. So it is now over 50% of our revenues of men watches, and it's growing extremely well and it's really fast. And then we also introduced this year a different version of it, which is more on an everyday use base and more in the proportions that are more conventional if you want, but very easy to wear. No? So it's the Octo Roma.
Cool, thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank.
I have to be able to recognize an object from 10 meters. I'm not obliged to see the logo on the dial, because if I have to read the logo on the dial, maybe I make a mistake. When you see the Octo, I love to say that it's a small architecture. It's just pure shapes. When you put together this pure shape, generate a new aesthetics. It's absolutely pure. It's you don't need to make a maquillage, because when you need to make a maquillage, maybe your idea it's not strong enough. But when your idea is absolutely unique and strong, you don't need to have facelift or maquillage. It's the idea that comes out. You cannot find this watch on another brand today in this environment. And the Octo Finissimo is the latest execution, but it's just the beginning for us because it's an impressive asset, and we continue to manage Octo Finissimo in different execution, and we will continue to talk about Octo Finissimo in the next future.